Greetings, I am Dr. Avery Kinley, and this module focuses on working with our students with disabilities. And we will talk about special education services, but part of the learning targets that you just reviewed highlighted the legislative and the history of special education. So we will talk about three very important cases and acts that are related to special education. First, we will talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, for which we have Section 504, and then we will talk about the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Each one of these acts helps guide how we provide services for students with disabilities. And so we start off with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was enacted in 1990. Within that act, accommodations must be provided for any individual that has a disability. Then we have Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Now that's a little bit more narrowly tailored in that it covers individuals that are in educational spaces. And so it does extend from K through 12th grade as well as through college. And then we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA. And this is what is utilized to provide services for individuals with disabilities in our public school settings. Each one of these particular acts authorizes individuals to implement accommodations based on different plans or programs. And so I wanted you to think about, what is special education? Well, special education is specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of a child. Specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of a child. So as we think about special education, we also have to think about the fact that when we look at it, it does not indicate the unique needs of a child with a disability, but the unique needs of a child. So because in many states, gifted services are housed underneath special education departments. And so individuals that are gifted also could have an individualized education program, the IEP. And we will talk about that a little bit later in this module. Now, the term special education has been utilized to focus on students that have disabilities, but we also utilize a term called exceptional education to denote that individuals that are gifted or individuals that are high achieving also have exceptionalities. And so we don't want to narrowly tailor education just for those individuals that have disabilities. And so many times you will hear the terms synonymous, the terms of students with disabilities and exceptional students. Now, there are 13 eligibility areas under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, beginning with specific learning disability. And specific learning disability is somewhat of a mixed bag of disability or disorders that individuals have, usually related to three areas: reading, writing, and math. And so you can have individuals that have difficulty with reading. We denote that as dyslexia. Individuals that may have difficulty in math, we denote that as dyscalculia. Individuals that may have difficulties in writing, which we call dysgraphia. You also will find that some individuals that have a specific learning disability have issues with retention. They may also have visual spatial issues, as well as issues with fine motor skills. Next, we have speech or language impairments, and so individuals that stutter or have fluency issues when speaking. We have multiple disabilities where they're coexisting disabilities. Emotional disturbance, so individuals that have behavioral problems, or individuals that could be manic depressed, or individuals that have anxiety or eating disorders. All of those individuals would fit under the umbrella of emotional disturbance. Then we have intellectual disabilities. So within intellectual disabilities, we have those that are moderately intellectually disabled, mildly intellectually disabled, severely intellectually disabled, and profoundly intellectually disabled. Now, prior to 2010, the eligibility area intellectual disabilities was called mental retardation. And so those individuals that have intellectual disabilities are usually well behind grade level in their learning, and they may have issues with social skills, which we call adaptive behaviors. Then we have hearing impairments, including deafness, so individuals that are hard of hearing. Orthopedic impairments, so individuals that may have some type of physical limitation. Other health impairments, so individuals that have a medical issue, and so we could denote individuals that may have epilepsy or sickle cell anemia, or may have a blood disorder, or individuals that even have attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We have visual impairments, including blindness, autism, and so I know that is one that has garnered a lot of attention recently as one of the disabilities that the prevalence rate has steadily increased over time. And so those that are autistic are usually in an isolated self. We indicate that those individuals are on the spectrum because it extends from individuals that are highly intelligent to individuals that are nonverbal, and STEM meaning self-stimulate. Then we have deaf blindness, so individuals that are unable to see or hear. Those that have had a traumatic brain injury, and so that's an acquired injury where it's a trauma based on some type of physical impact to the brain. And then significant developmental delay. So significant developmental delay, just developmental delays that occur usually prior to an individual getting to school. So those are the 13 disability areas. I want you to take a second and think about which eligibility areas that you would think you would see in your classroom. So based on the eligibility areas, these are the eligibility areas that you probably would see in your classroom: specific learning disability, speech or language impairments, emotional disturbance, other health impairments, and autism. If you are in a general education setting, or if you are in a co-taught collaborative setting with general education students, these are the disabilities that you will probably see within your class. The other disabilities are more so in what's called a self-contained setting. And those individuals usually do not take classes with non-disabled peers. So one of the things that's very important, one of the things that we have to practice, is utilizing people-first language. And so our language and terminology often reflect our beliefs, perceptions, and misconceptions. The person should always come first, and then their disability second. So an individual with a disability, a person who has autism, a student with a learning disability. So those are just examples. Speakers should avoid terms that equate the person with the disability. So don't say the disabled. Instead, simply say a child who has a disability. Don't say a person who suffers from ADHD. Instead, say a person who has ADHD. Don't say a man who's confined to a wheelchair. Instead, say a man who uses a wheelchair. So we always want to lead with the person first and then the disability second. So we've reached our first checkpoint. And so from this, I want you to answer the questions that follow.